Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first live debate of the Congress of Young Researchers 2021. I am Priscille de Géa, and I will be the chairwoman of this debate. We are very glad to discuss today the question of the place of ecology in laboratories with specialists from different horizons. The discussion will mention the actual challenges met in laboratories facing the current ecological question and talk about strategies developed to answer this problematic. You are following the broadcast of this debate, and we will be glad to take your questions on the Q&A part. Or in case of technical issues with Q&A part, please send them to me via the private chat. Feel free to ask any question you want all along the session, and we'll transmit them to guests and make the debate livelier. Now I'm glad to introduce our three speakers of this morning. We have with us Nikoline Borgemann, Jeroen Dobbelaere, and Thibaut Voeltzel, that we greatly thank to be with us today and participate in this debate that will be really interesting and challenging. Now, the debate will be moderated by Mathieu Rouault, a scientific journalist at GrandLabo that we also sincerely thank for the debates, organizing the debates of Aura Congress. Place is yours now, Mathieu.
Hello, thank you, Priscille. Hello, everybody. Welcome in this first roundtable meeting on this online event. Like Priscilla said just right now, my name is Mathieu Rouault. I'm a science journalist at GrandLabo, and I will be your host today. Maybe some of you know me. I am very much interested in all the questions and issues related to how science is done today, and I host a show on YouTube on this matter. The first roundtable is all about the place of ecology and environment in research labs today. Do research activities has an impact on the planet? Why did this question arise a few years ago? How can we evaluate it? Do scientists feel concerned about these questions? What can they do about it? Is it possible for them to change the way they work, to take the preservation of the environment into account without compromising the quality of their research? We will talk about all these questions with three guests that I'm going to introduce to you right now. Nikoline Borgemann. Hello, Nikoline. Do you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
You have an initial formation of biochemist and notably studied epigenetic mechanisms, but you choose to include your environmentalist thought to your daily work and therefore created Ava Sustain company in Copenhagen. This startup is a value-driven company which aims to promote sustainability in life sciences and biotech lab. Thanks for being with us today. Jeroen Dobbelaere. Hello, Jeroen.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
You're currently a scientist at Max Perutz Lab in Vienna, and you are studying cell division and communication mechanism mainly. You dedicated part of your professional life to your commitment to the question of ecology, and notably you've created the climate initiative in Max Perutz Lab, in which you are a climate advocate. Thank you for being with us. And last but not least, Thibaut Voeltzel, how are you?
Oh.
Do you hear me?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thibaut is a research engineer at the Cancerology Center of Lyon, CRCL, and is developing environmental initiatives in his institute, bringing his support and promoting recycling and eco-responsible approaches. It's great to have you, three of you, with us. Please, like Priscille said, feel free, if you hear us right now, feel free to share your questions and comments in the live chat. Feel free to participate to this very important debate. Before discussing the way three of you, help scientists to reduce their environmental footprint, I'd like to hear each one of you about your personal motivation to do so. Nikoline, first thing first, what is Ava Sustain and when did you create it?
So Ava Sustain is a one-woman company, that's me. And I started it roughly 1.5 years ago.
One girl army.
Exactly. We've seen that before working well in climate actions, right? So why not? So I founded this company because I was very much struggling with doing science at the same time seeing how much of an environmental impact it has. So I worked in wet labs for many years, and I always loved working in a lab, but I never came to terms with the environmental impact of it.
At the very beginning, at the very beginning, why did you choose to quit academy and create this startup?
There are many reasons for that, to be honest. I think the working environment in academia could be much better. I think we're working too hard, too much. I think the atmosphere is too harsh somehow. But I also just wanted to, I think basic research is super important. I think research in health science is extremely important. But my heart lies with the planet and the environment, and I wanted to take action rather than doing research.
And
so that was my personal motivation. Yeah.
Who are your current clients, the main clients of Ava Sustain? Who are they?
So I mostly work with universities and publicly funded institutions in Denmark and outside of Denmark. I also work with a few private companies, also in Denmark and outside of Denmark. But academia is really, I love academia in many ways. I think it's a tough environment, but I also really like that it's so non-corporate. There's really space for ideas and stuff. So I enjoy working with academia mostly.
Why did you say that it's a tough environment?
Because there's a pyramid shape career in the academia, right? We can have a lot of students, we can have less PhD students, even less postdocs, and becoming a group leader or senior scientist, that's tough. So you have to compete hard, you have to publish well, you have to work hard. Many people have to compromise their private lives to get somewhere. It's very much about getting money, publishing well, and that's not for everyone. In reality, I think it's not for anyone. I think it's tough.
Okay, thank you once again for being with us. And of course, we will be discussing what you're doing every day with Ava Sustain. But just before that, Jeroen Dobbelaere. When and how did your interest in ecology and the defense of the planet merge with your own career as a scientist?
Yeah, so I'm still a cell biologist. So my main job is still doing research in the lab. And I think it's important to know the connection, right? So you need to know what the workflows are in the lab. But I've been always interested in sustainability, and I have a own garden, and I try to cycle to work. But for me, the enlightenment came like more than 2.5 years ago, when there was a survey at the University of Vienna on sustainability in the university, and only 2 people replied to this survey, which was
what
me
was the question of the survey?
It was what should we do? Was like, should we do more, and do you have exact examples of what you want to change in the university institute? And I was just shocked at the moment, because we had the movement of Fridays for Future and other movements already happening. And I was like, this cannot be. And then I contacted the second person, and we made this group at our institute to really look, what are we doing? What can we change? And for me, it was also a realization that many of the things I didn't consider as being having a big impact, and I guess we'll get back to that, like mobility in academia. I was not aware of this like 2.5 years ago, and that for me showed that we need to do something. And I didn't quit science, and I think we need people inside to really show the management of the universities, which, like Nikoline said, is very hierarchical. That we need to tell them, like, we want change, and we and now so did, yeah.
You've created the climate initiative at Max Perutz Labs.
Exactly. So that was,
what is it?
We got to then a motivated group of 15 people together, and and this more or less happened when Corona was starting, and we managed then, because most people had a little bit more time on their hands, we managed to meet like every week. And we started with very general discussions to really clear actions. So then we realized we're missing lots of data. So we did lots of data analysis, how much products we buy, how much energy we use, to get a real detailed CO2 footprint. we're teaching a lot of courses for students, employees, and other people on campus. We also have a lecture series on climate topics for everybody. So we have a Zoom channel also. And then we're doing very practical things like helping people to repair their bikes, to talking to the government or to the city of Vienna to improve cycling. So we're trying to really put practical things. And one thing we just
important fights.
Important fights. And one thing we're doing now is doing a real clear plastic analysis of what labs produce and find ways with, again, the city of Vienna to recycle and reduce plastic use in the lab. Yeah.
And we will talk about all this in a few minutes. Thibaut Voeltzel, how long have you been participating in the Environment Committee, and what is its job?
Actually, as Jeroen and Nikoline, I think that there is a lot to do in the labs because and people don't have time to do that. For me, I was interested for a very long time on environmental questions, but in the lab, in the Cancer Center of Lyon, we are about 500 people. And there was no committee on this point, and it is just from 1 year that we brought up a committee to try to bring people to these questions, to take care of environment. Many people are already convinced that it is important, but they don't have time. They don't find the time. So it was important after many individual initiatives.
Is it true? Is it true they don't have time? Do you believe them? When you feel that the subject is important, when you feel that the topic is important, you find the time. No?
Yes, it's a question of priority. I think that it is should be a priority for everybody, but it cannot be in these days a priority for everybody. And it should, even if it should be, I think that people are very busy and sometimes overbooked. Many people are really in difficult conditions, even students. And
maybe they do not know how to take the problem.
Yes, I think that's why I think it's important to bring the question and to help people to be able to answer to this question. That's why we created a committee to make something more sustained as a committee, because people can take some individual initiatives that will not stand for a long time. Everybody knows that we should save water and electricity, but when you leave a lab, there is always 1 or 2 lights still open and on, and there are many questions like this. Also, it's a question because we are working a big part of the cancer center is in the hospital and cancer center of Lyon, and people don't know how to, or what is done already in this hospital. So that's question of communication a lot. Also to remind people that we have to take care, and also to give new habits. That's why it will be the most difficult, I think, is to change the habits. There are many ways to save, but we don't do it enough.
Thank you very much, Thibaut. After this very short presentation of 3 of you, let's jump into the main question, I guess, of this roundtable meeting. What is the impact of science on planet? What do we know about it? In labs, what are the main causes of pollution? Who wants to answer this very complicated question? Of course, it depends on fields of research and disciplinary.
Yes, it is difficult to generalize because I think that for biologists, we have an impact which will be very different from physicians. And in biology, we have a lot of chemicals also that we use. But in general, I think that one common point in science may be the data saving, because on data and the use of electricity, but also of many hardware to allow to save data is also.
We will talk about data in a few seconds. Nikoline, what is your point of view about about this question? What are the main causes of pollution in labs?
I think if you look internally in a lab, like the things you actually do in a lab, then of course you're consuming a lot of electricity. Unfortunately, that's where many people stop looking, because the majority of the footprint from laboratory work actually comes from the products that enter the room. So we should definitely reduce how much energy we're consuming and how much waste we're producing, but we also really have to look at what's entering
Isabelle
our
Grosjean
labs.
in the chat says plastic. Plastic is the enemy, maybe.
Well, it's a friend and an enemy, right? Just like out in
Yes.
society. There's a reason why we're using it, but we shouldn't be overusing it. We should use it wisely, and we don't use it wisely currently in many labs. And that goes for many other products as well. At least in certain parts of the world, time is the most precious resource we have, apparently. So we save a lot of time by consuming a lot of products that are leaving a considerable footprint behind on the planet.
A question to three of you, of Johan Le Toquin. A lot of the plastic wastes produced in our lab is biologically contaminated. Their treatment is very regulated and they are destined to be burned. Is there some already existing alternatives to take care of it?
Yes, is the answer. So it's always a challenge, because it's a mix of many things, and chemicals and biological hazard is a problem, but it can be solved. And for example, what we are doing is in Austria, anything in the lab needs to be autoclaved on site anyway. So that means everything is what is biohazard is taken care of. What we cannot solve is the chemical problem. So if you contaminate it with chemicals, your plastic, we cannot put it in the general trash, and it can, or in the trash for recycling, and it cannot be reused afterwards. But we did the calculations, and this is for about, so we are really cell biology, structural biology institute, and this is only 5%. So we can easily recycle 95% of our plastic. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something on the time thing, because this is something I've been working on quite a lot. It's the time thing is very easy, in my opinion. You need to be able to put it on your CV that you work for sustainability, because now when you go for the next level, it's publications and maybe grants and maybe some seminars you given, which is accounted for, but not your work on sustainability. And the moment this is a criteria for the next job, people will find time. Is what we're trying to push through.
Yes, I'd like to ask you, three of you, once again, a general question about the global impact of science on the environment. What do we know about on the importance of the impact that activities of research do have on planets? Do we have good tools, good instruments to evaluate it? And if so, what are they? Because sometimes some researchers with whom I'm discussing say to me, we don't really know how far we pollute with our activities. It's not such a big deal. What do you answer to such an opinion?
So we did a very detailed CO2 analysis of the institute, and yes, so like Nikoline said, some of the products you buy in is very difficult to calculate today, but all the rest is very easy. So you just look at your electricity meter, and there are conversion rates in every country to measure how much CO2 this produces. And there, as Nikoline said, labs are very energy intensive. So both from machines, but also ventilation and other equipment, which is needed to work safely. And also one topic which was not discussed, which came out for us, is the business travel in academia. Since we're not producing anything, we don't produce any waste or CO2 in-house, but we use a lot of flights to go to meetings or to invite speakers, or at least this was the case in pre-COVID. And for us, this is more than 50% of our footprint. So this is
more than 50%.
More than 50%. And most institutes.
This is the big issue.
Yeah. So most institutes on the globe have the same number, right? I mean, depending a little bit how efficient their buildings or how energy efficient their buildings are. And there are institutes like the ETH in Zurich, which really put a lot of effort in optimizing their buildings. They're, I guess, at 70% of their footprint is already flights now, or was.
What do you answer to researchers who said, yes, okay, there's pollution, science pollutes also, but compare to other industries, to other human activities all over the world, it's nothing. Why should I, as a researcher, why should I take care of such a question? It's compared to other industries, to other activities, it's once again not a big deal.
I think it's the same answer always. I mean, there's only one planet, and everybody has to do their share. Otherwise, we're never going to reach the goals that we were supposed to reach, like the CO2 neutrality in 2040, 2050.
So everybody has to do something at its own level.
Needs to, and yes, research is important, but the challenge for us is to find a way that we can make research more sustainable, and that we can also take part of what we're doing. And I have to say, I mean, I've been talking to lots of companies, and I have to say many of the companies, even big companies, are much farther ahead than universities or research institutes, because they clearly did their risk assessments and they know the rules are going to change in the future, so they need to adapt. So we're even feeling that we as a university are lagging behind in making this transition, and it's not an easy one, but we need to make this transition and we need to make it fast.
One question about data. So Thibaut, you were mentioning this a few minutes ago. What do we know about the pollution caused by data? And it's a big problem because science works with data. How can we do without it, or with less data?
Once again, at the individual fronts, I think that many people can do something about avoiding to make duplicates or triplicates of the same data. Also, when they analyze, we receive data that are not that are just raw data, and when we work on them, we make copies and we work again, and we have many ways to copy. People send and also live on the cloud some data in the institute, and sometimes out of the institute, and that is a huge waste of energy, but also of hardwares that are very polluting. The production of hardware is, as you may know, very pollutant, and I think that people at the individual way can do some things. And again, one of the questions is also a question of communication, that I think that people don't know, they don't take care, because they have, as I say, many things to do, but also because they know that there is a problem, but they don't have conscience of what they really produce and what is the problem. So it's really a problem of communication, and also of the institutions to have to sensitize these institutions about how we save the data, and that's a huge point also.
Let's talk about actions now. Nikoline, what are the topics? What are the subjects of the formation, the courses of Ava Sustain? What are you talking about to researchers in this occasion?
I always have a few different topics that I go into, and I always start with plastic, because that's where most scientists find interest in sustainability in the lab in the first place. But I also discuss, like, how can you reduce energy consumption and water consumption? How can you do procurement or purchasing in a different way? How can you consume less? Generally, being a minimalist, how does that practically work in a lab?
It's
Things
workshops.
Like that.
It is workshops. They are.
Yeah.
How do you organize it?
Well, so for a long time, it's been online workshops, right? So I'm contacted by different institutions or companies in and outside of Europe, actually, and then I do online webinars or workshops, and then we discuss, like, both. I mean, I give a lot of hands-on tips, of course, like what are the things you can do, and then we also discuss what are the obstacles, because I think just what like Thibaut said was, like changing habits, it's doable, but it's super difficult. And like the key is really in the habits of the people in the lab. I think we can't fix this by turning a few buttons. We have to make the people in the labs aware of how they interact with the laboratory is key to going green, which is also very difficult because of time and pressure. And maybe you have a group leader who doesn't support it. There are many, many reasons why people are struggling with going green in the lab.
And what are your audience? What are there many PhD students, or is it more senior scientists?
There's definitely a skew towards the young generation. It's I think in that sense it's reflecting very much society in general, that it's like the young people are just generally more interested and more keen on taking actions. But I do also see older generations showing a huge interest, which is very nice. And it's both, like I also taught technicians, PhD students, and then also master students. So it's, in a way, it's many different levels, but sadly, many group leaders are completely absent from this discussion.
Like group leaders? Okay.
So professors,
yes.
I think, yeah.
Je do not have a time.
Yeah, and their priorities are simply different. And they don't think it's their responsibility. If anything, it's somewhere else at the university. It's maybe there's a green office or whatever, but this is not on their job description, right? They're here to do important research and get funding, publish well, not going
get
green.
funding. Oh my God. The question, Jeroen, do you feel that? How can I ask this question? Your initiative, climate initiative at Max Perutz Labs, does your university help you? Do you feel alone or not?
So I'm not alone, because we're one research institute, but the university has 10,000 employees and 50,000 students. So it's quite a big university. And what happened is that a lot of seeds were popping up like 2 or 3 years ago. So the first thing what we did was to interconnect them. And now we have like working together with the groups. And then we realized we are not used to talk to the management and the rector and the vice rector. So we really took us time to establish these channels. And one of them, the things we really said from the beginning was that the university needs a green office, because this data needs to be coordinated and better communicated, and we should have a clear strategy where the university wants to go. And this is now happening. So after 2 years pushing, this office will come. It's a start, it's just one position, but this will then hopefully grow in the future. And then it's like politics, right? There's a lot of fractions. So we have a rector, but we have a senate. So now there's a party in the senate of the university really supporting us, and we're organizing an e-symposium on flights with them together. So things are happening and the support is coming. But unfortunately, there is no clear structure in place yet. So every time you have to ask and find the ways to get some money or get some support. But
this is a lack of time.
It's a lack of priority. So we just had on our lecture series, one of the persons from the TU Graz in Austria, so one other university, a technical university in Austria. And they're much further, and the rector decided to put 2% of the budget in sustainability for the next 10 years. And this opens so many opportunities, right? Because once the money is there, people can apply for it, they get interested in the topic, they know it's going to be supported long term, and so on and so forth. And I'm quite sure, I mean, they have an ambitious goal of 2030 CO2 neutrality, but I'm quite sure if they keep on the track they started already, they will get there.
And I see Nikoline say yes. You're okay, you agree with
very much. I think what we need now is the top management to prioritize that a university has to go green.
We will talk about
I
this.
think there are definitely activists enough at the universities to do stuff. We just need to support them now.
Yeah, and the thing I want to say, it's 2% of their budget, right? So I mean, I know universities are struggling for money, but it's not a huge. It's not that you're shifting 50% of your budget to one thing, right? It's 2%. So I think every university in Europe, and I guess in the Western world, should be able to put that or take that decision. Yeah.
I have a general question too, but we were talking about actions and waste, because I have questions in the chat that I will ask to you in a few seconds. But before that, Thibaut, can you please sum up the main actions of the committee that we mentioned already? Please put on your mic, because we did not hear you.
I'm sorry, I on my mic. Yes, the committee is really new now for the cancer center, for the research cancer center. The hospital has made many things since 10 years that we developed mostly about the waste, how to manage the waste and to not to allow people to sort as much as possible. So that's the first thing that was done. I think for the committee, the new committee that we created for the research center, we have to work a lot about communication inside, and also on the direction of the university, because also I'm not directly involved in the university, but as from what I heard, there is not a lot done to sustain the environment question in the university, and also even at the level of the cancer center. So we have to work a lot about stimulating and allow the direction to take measures to allow and to sensitize people.
I have a question about how to reduce waste. Laurent asked in the chat, what is for you the first everyday actions that we can adopt to reduce waste? Who wants to answer?
I can say
Nikoline.
something here. I think I'm repeating a mantra now that goes over the globe over and over again, like reduce, reuse, and then recycle, right? I think we've been over focusing on the recycling part, and we have to start focusing on the reduction. Like reuse as much as possible, take glass whenever you can instead of plastic, all of these things. Just minimize how much you're using of everything. You will also create less waste if you do that.
Clotilde asked, it's a similar question, but I want you to share with you the questions that I have in the chat. How can we have pure and safe plastic for experience, but at the meantime, more ecological?
Maybe I can ask this. So so pure would, for many experiments, definitely if you're doing very high or you need high grade plastics, is very difficult to obtain from recycle. But there are many options. There are different types of plastics, some that are easier recyclable. And also many companies are now trying to reduce just the size. So just having thinner tissue culture disc can already reduce half of your plastic waste you produce. So check the manufacturing or the manufacturers, check the box, what's on there. But still there can be, I mean, it's really a culture, and I'll just give one example, which was also what struck me. I'm teaching a molecular biology course, and we're not allowed to use glass anymore in the molecular biology course because of insurance reasons. So we're teaching the new generations to use plastic after plastic, and they're doing streaking out bacteria, taking one time and throwing it in the bin. And I guess this is also, it's a culture, right? It's really think for each experiment, what can I use? And I also realized for me, I mean, there's lots of experiments where I don't need sterile water or I don't need the new plastics, and you can reuse it. So really be critical, like for all the data you produce, be also critical of how you use materials. And for us, I mean, we have different floors, and on one of the floors, we now have all the tissue culture is using glass. So we even managed to do very sensible experiments. It needed some optimization for the washing process, but now everybody is using glass pipettes, even in very sensitive tissue culture settings. So it is possible, yeah.
Another question from the chat. Luca asked, I know that when launching a project, you might need to be validated by an ethical committee if you work on animals or humans. Is ecology, sustainability, footprint also assessed by this kind of committee?
I think with time, yes. At least that's my hope. I think
not now.
The other two things, they go under the umbrella of responsible science, right? That's why we look into the ethics. but there's also some ethics to the environmental impact, right? So I think at some point that's also going to be considered.
So I think it's a job of the employees of the universities, right? Really ask your boss what is my footprint? And maybe they will say no, or we don't know, but then they can. And many universities now have sustainable reports online. So read them, but read them critically, because some of them are missing quite a bit of the footprint or whatever. And then just ask. So for us, for example, it was that they didn't include flights, for example, in their first report. Great, but since we know it's quite a bit, it of course mimics, and now they're working on it, and now they realize they don't have a system to acquire the data, so they have to implement the system. So it takes a little bit of time, but it's important to just ask and try to get as high up, because they will need to answer this question quite soon. And for us, I can say in Austria is the universities every 4 years, they have to get money from the government. And this will be a criteria. And they will be asked to say, like, what are you doing? What's your footprint? How do you plan to get it 10%, 20%, 30% lower in the next term? And this will come, yeah.
Maybe a question for Thibaut now, but of course you're free, three of you, to answer a question from Priscille. Would the use of greener energy be a possibility and part of the solution to the data pollution in institutions? Aha, that's a question. We will organize another roundtable meeting about this very specific subject.
Yeah, actually, I think so, but not only for science. I think that to use green energy is a good way to save the planet, but it is not just in science. It should be for most of the activities. And what I think about that is also that we may be able to act as a university, as structures to incite the people to use green energy. But the thing that, as Nikoline said, we have to also work at our level to avoid to spend too much. But I don't think there is a general question about that in the university and research centers.
Not yet, yes.
Okay.
A question for Nikoline.
Yeah.
Nikoline, yes, you wanted to add something? Oh, Thibaut, sorry.
No, to the previous question. So maybe Nikoline, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add exactly what you said, that we can't just switch to green energy and say we did what we had to do. I mean, we have to drastically reduce energy consumption regardless of where the energy comes from, because there simply is a limit to how many solar panels and how many windmills we can throw up in a short time. And we have a lot of black energy on the energy grids in most of the countries in the world. So we simply have to reduce how much energy we're consuming, no matter what.
Thibaut, you wanted to add to
yes,
say something
about the two previous questions about the fact that there is incitation for the institutions to have committees is now coming also in France for the evaluations that are now in 5 years in France. It's about the same. There is a question about is there any environmental committee in the structure. So that's just an incitation for now. As far as I know, there is no in grants, when we ask for money for the studies, there is no question about that in the grants, but I hope it will come. But already at the government level, there is some incitation to have committees. So if we have committees, that means that we may be able to make evolutions in the use of people. And about concerning the plastics, also there is one thing that it's good to avoid plastic as much as possible, but I think also we can also reuse some plastics, because when we passed from glass to plastic a few years ago, the plastic was just one for one use, and as people use plastic glasses, maybe they recycle it when they have a drink outside, they can reuse their plastic, and now I think it's the same for the lab. For many uses, we can reuse the plastic. So that's one way we could avoid to spend too much, to have more waste. And also one thing, as mentioned, Jeroen, people use many plastics in the lab, especially in biology, that are sterilized. And not only for plastic, but people think that sterilization means clean. actually clean is enough for most of our activities. If you don't make culture, you don't need to have sterilized products. Clean is enough. And that also can be communicated, and things really change the habits of people. And I think it's an important way that we can also advise.
I have a question for Nikoline. Does a question from Laura? Does Ava Sustain have a research development pool? Maybe not yet, you will say, to find less polluting materials for research or more sustainable materials, at least, etc. I have read, she said, I have read, for example, some papers about bacteria able to digest plastic, for example.
Yeah, so far this little corporation doesn't do any research, in the sense that I look into a lot of stuff. I do a lot of research, but no laboratory research. Luckily, there are many other places doing things like this, right? Also in academia, looking into, like, can we have truly biodegradable plastics, or can we make plastic out of something else, and all of these things. So I don't think it will take a decade until we have much better plastic products than we do today, but they won't be coming out of my hands, that's for sure.
A question to you from Clotilde. Do you think that private companies and startup as Ava Sustainability can really help to bypass all this institution timeline and make efficient and quick actions in labs?
I'm not sure exactly what that question means. Do you have an idea, Mathieu, of how to rephrase that?
Maybe Clotilde, you can. I don't want to speak at its place. Maybe Clotilde, you can ask your question, and I mark it as answer. But Clotilde, if you hear me, feel free to re-ask your question, because I don't want to misunderstood it. Ambre, hello, she said. Hello, Ambre. Do you have some names and projects done in France that could help labs willing to change? I am thinking about Labo 1.5 that is working on the tools, on a tool for labs to calculate their footprint. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point, Ambre. In France, Labo 1.5 is the main organism association that go further on this question. I don't know, but Thibaut, maybe you know. I don't know if there is a association.
Actually, I don't know either. I heard of it, but I had no link up to now. I think people in the committee have been in contact, but it is really, as a French researcher, I can tell that I had no information in our direction that came from the institution. So I think it's from CNRS. But
yes, mainly the people of Labo 1.5 are from the CNRS.
Either I missed it, but I had no information, and I'm a bit sensitized on this point. I think I should have it, but I didn't get it.
I think there could be a Green Lab Europe initiative coming up. At least things are moving. So I think there could be a European continent kind of initiative on the coming, so to say.
A general question, because we do not talk about pandemic, but let's have a word about it, because I think it's important. What are the effects of the pandemic on the way science is done? Do you think that we will come back to practices and habits we had before COVID-19? I have in mind travels in plane, mainly.
Yes, so I can maybe add some stuff there. Yes, so lots of things changed, but I have the feeling, I mean, even it's bad to say, but it's too short for people to change habits yet. So that's why we are also
please another pandemic.
No. This is I don't want another pandemic. I think but it showed that it's possible. I think this is the message to give, is that it showed that you can cycle. So we had like an increase of 10% of people cycling to work, because they were not willing to. I mean, the public transport in Vienna is great, but of course you meet people, so many more people cycle to work. Flights went to 5% of the flights we had before. So our footprint at once was 50% less than the year before. So it shows that it's possible. And now the goal for us is really to keep it, right? And that's why we're organizing lots of events and teaching people like, look, and many things change. So for example, we have a PhD program on campus, and they were inviting by flight on campus 80 people every year. So now this is completely gone and everything is done online. This is just with one small decision, 80 flights going back in Europe or further that are canceled, and so on and so forth. So I think now it's really to put the small measures on where we can make a difference.
You agree? Oh, sorry.
And also, and then the question is a little bit research techniques, right? And I think also there people have seen that the waste that was produced from masks laying around on the streets shows people again that what we're producing, right? That once you have it on and the next day it's on the street, so people realize that they're doing the same in the lab, and I guess there is a consciousness. What people now need is really techniques or solutions to see that if I put my or I rewash my bottle, it needs to be somehow organized, or I need a space for it. So it's now our challenge and the group leaders and the institute to provide solutions. Yes.
Nikoline, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think something good that came out of the pandemic, because good things can come out of shitty situations, right? Is that a lot of labs now experience that they cannot get the consumables that they normally could. So a lot of labs have struggled with getting pipette tips and gloves and general facial mask and all of these things. And I think that was a not so friendly reminder that resources are limited, because in many ways, both in the lab and outside of labs, we act like we think resources are unlimited, that
it's
it will never end.
Cognitive bias, I
exactly.
should say.
And I think this time we really felt it, that there are things you can't get. I mean, you can order them, but you're not going to get them. And I think that made a lot of people change behavior, simply not by choice, but by they simply had to, like reusing a lot of stuff, thinking twice before consuming things. And I think this is something that could actually change in the longer run also. I think with the flights, we have to really stick to it and be like, we don't have to take all these flights when it's possible again. But I think in terms of consuming in the labs, I think this could be a permanent change, because people simply had to do things differently. And they also saw that they are saving a lot of money by consuming this in the labs.
And thank you, Clotilde, for asking once again your question. So Clotilde, the question of Clotilde was, to make concrete actions in labs, can private companies as Ava Sustainability be really helpful instead of waiting that researchers doing by themselves? Voilà. If they do not have time.
And I think it's super difficult to make the labs go green. And I think we need all kinds of people involved in that. I think we need the researchers, we need the decision makers in the universities and in the labs. And I think what I can do is, for example, to inspire and motivate and give specific tools on how people can do it. And that's something that I felt like I couldn't do from within the university, simply because it's very bureaucratic, things go very slow. You need a lot of people approving of things before you do anything. And now I'm on my own, I'm independent, I can do a lot of stuff, and I can inspire a lot of young people to make a difference. So that's how I feel like I can contribute to the transition inside of academia, while I'm actually standing outside of academia.
Luca asked, it's a question that I want to share with you too. The pandemic has drastically reduced flights and transport, but when we had to do a field trip, we need to use more cars to reduce the number of persons per car. It seems hard to concile ecology and sanitary measures. Does this comment inspire you?
Yes. So yeah, I guess science is always going to be a trade-off, right? So you have to decide. But clearly, from the question, he's thinking about it, right? And then maybe the university has some. So we're now moving to electric cars where possible, and people have to report their CO2 footprint also from field trips. That's the two things we're doing, right? And it should not. I think inhibit research, but it's fine, right? And I can just give the example. We have a worm lab next door. We was using a worm that was in Belize, and they could only pick it up there. So they had nice field trips to Belize. And now in the pandemic, they really put the great effort in, and now they first managed to culture them in the lab in Vienna. So they don't have to fly anymore. And I think these kind of stories should be celebrated, right? It's really the very hard work of finding out the life cycle from this worm, this marine worm. And now they can do much more research because it's easier to, because they have much better equipment here, and they can take their research to the next level.
I have a philosophical question in the chat that I want to share with you too. Maybe it's a little apart from the main theme of this roundtable meeting, but maybe not. Do you think, says Elodie, do you think that we should force people to think more about the question of ecology? And by people, I think Elodie thinks about also researchers. Do you think that we have to find a way to force them to think about, to feel concerned about ecology? Or the best way is to do prevention and convince them that ecology is a major issue? To be honest, Elodie, I don't see how we can force people to think about ecology, but I don't want to push questions and answer in the same time.
I agree with you. I think it's difficult to oblige people to think to something, but we can bring them by sensitivity. Sensitizing people is possible through giving the opportunities and giving solutions, and to show them that the impact of what their activity has on the environment. I think that it is not clear for everybody. So you can sensitize people, but you cannot oblige them to think about it every minute. And it's a question of ethic or also philosophy. We cannot oblige people to think.
So I slightly disagree, because we make people think about a lot of things. Like if you enter a lab, you need to do a safety course, right? So that means you have to think about safety. You need to be trained, and so on. Is why not do the same for sustainability? And this is what we're planning to do from next year, is that we'll include in the training, and this is mandatory for everybody every year, next to the safety, also on sustainability. And this will not be much, but just that people start thinking. And then the other thing we're pushing at the university level is that sustainability should be included in all master courses. I mean, it will not happen soon. But definitely for biology, this I think is essential, because you need people to think, and this is the kind of little step. But on the other hand, I agree that it's more easy to make it easy for people, right? So not force them, but say like, look, we have a seminar on this, or we have a pilot of new tissue culture flask here from a company which are more sustainable. Do you want to try it? So I think it needs both some regulations, but also lots of stimulation on the other side.
I'd like to
explain well. I agree with you. It's just a question of sensitizing people and bringing them the opportunity to be efficient in this way. And I don't think, when I say the question is, is it possible to force people to think? I think it's good to bring them to this question in front of them as much as possible, so that they will be more efficient. But you can't force people to think.
I think there are certain things you can actually force people to do, right? For example, an institute leader can decide everybody chills up their -80 freezers to -70 next week. So there are ways to force people. And in one way, I mean, on one side, I wish we didn't have to. I'm like, I would much rather invite people to take action. But it's also like the clock is really ticking. It's not like we have 100 years to go carbon neutral on the planet. We have very few years. So on one side, I wish that we had the time to just inspire people, give them knowledge, let them know what they can do. But I think in certain aspects, we simply also have to force people to do things. Like, for example, in one company that I'm collaborating with, the management just took a decision that I don't care about all the anxieties and doubts the scientists have about chilling up their freezers. They're going to do it. And I thought that was a really brave and bold decision, because scientists can be really provocative when they're forced to do something, right? So I think we need a combination. We need to invite people, but sometimes we also have to force them to act differently. We can't force them to think, but we can force them to act differently in certain ways.
But of course, we need help from the institutions, from the top of the system, because we can't force without law, without rules, and the rules are produced by, scientific governance. I don't know how to say that, and that's an important theme. Also, what about scientists? I'd like to come back with you on the time topic, because we've mentioned it earlier, but maybe we could add some ideas about it. What about scientists who say that it is just because of the fact that they do not have time, that they don't take care about environment? How is it possible to find a way to say to them that by dealing with this environmental matter, they could gain time?
I mean, for certain things, for certain green actions in the lab, you are actually saving time. For example, if you keep nice inventories of all the stuff you have in the lab, like reagents, equipment, all of these things, samples also, if you have nice inventories, you reduce the risk of things getting lost, going missing, and being double purchased. So that's actually very green. Also because when you know where to find things in the freezer, for example, you can open the door for a shorter period of time and the freezer will consume less energy. And maybe this sounds like a minor thing, but we have a lot of freezers, and we have a lot of freezers that consume a lot of energy. So it does make a difference when you know where things are. And that also saves you time, because I have wasted a lot of time in the lab because I didn't actually know where to find stuff. So that's an example of something that will save you time if you make nice inventories, for example. But not everything saves you time. And that's also something we have to accept, that certain things you will save money and save time from doing, but other things you need to invest time and money, and that's how it should be. That's just how it is.
In the chat, Isabel says that maybe a solution would be to create specific jobs dedicated to the environmental question in labs. Is it a good idea or a false good idea in the sense that it's an individual responsibility question, environment?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? You need experts and people that really can dedicate 100% of their time and energy to this cause. But I still think it's important to also get the people along. And this is, I can give my example, is I feel my strength is that I know how a lab works and really know how the people in the lab think and what their challenges are and what their problems are and how they think about their next grant and whatever, because I think it's important. And then I can combine it with telling them, like, look, this is something we can change and this would help us to be more sustainable. And then I can tell them, like, look, but you can also communicate to the new students that are coming. And actually we just did a survey and compared it to one we did 2 years ago, and there none of the new students choose the institute because it was green, and now 20% of the students said, like, oh, they looked at it before that I choose a more sustainable institute where to go. So I think it needs both. Yeah, so really dedicated people, optimal, because a lot of things also learn in the background, right? Because a building, which is actually what's consuming most next to flights, is not my expertise, right? I learned now in the last 2 years a lot about ventilation systems and other ways of cooling a building, but it's in principle not our expertise. So, but we need to tell people in the building maintenance that, all right, the ventilation is now changed to maybe a little bit less, but it still works and we're still happy and we still feel good and so on. So you need both kind of people.
A question in the chat from Charlene. Hello, Charlene. Could we go back on data? Yes, of course, because we are in the era of big data with all the omics science and with the always better microscopy devices, for example. Not having duplicate of those data is super risky. So I don't think less copies is a good way to reduce pollution.
I can comment on this one. I mean,
yes.
if you store your data somewhere, in a single copy, this place will keep double records of your data. So you don't have to do this. You don't have to duplicate your data on different servers because they will do it for you. Like regardless if it's the cloud or if it's your internal university server or whatever, it's backed up. So I don't have to do that. And you don't have to do that. That's very important to stress here.
And that's a clear-cut question answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I wanted to add something is that actually data storage is not the main problem. It's really the computing with big data, and he's completely right. So analyzing genomic data and the tons of sequencing we get out is huge. And I can just give the data from, we have a next door institute, the IMP, and they have a huge modern building and a new modern server room, and there I think it's more than a third of their energy goes to just servers because
Thibaut,
they're using
oh, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. Thibaut, you wanted to add something, or I'm wrong?
No, I completely agree that there is a question of duplicate, and that is already done by the institution most of the time. And that even for that, people do more and more copies, and it can be in several places. So I think it's still a problem. And the servers also, on the use of servers is also to make calculation also is very consuming, as a Jeroen. I don't know if people are ready to reduce their activity on that. I'm not sure. But for the saving and duplicate very close, maybe sometimes very close data sets that are, it's not necessary that is accessible to, you don't need to save many copies, sometimes just a copy with just slide changes. So it can be very consuming also for that.
Something else you can do on data, just to add something, is, for example, like I produced a lot of junk data in my time in the lab because, I was optimizing things, the antibody didn't work, or the microscope wasn't in focus or whatever, and there's no reason to save this kind of data. If I know it's never going to be useful for anyone, delete it. And secondly, if you store data that you think is meaningful, but someone else later in time won't be able to see what it is and how exactly you acquired that data, then it's also useless. So if we store data, we have to make sure this is actually relevant in the future, and people in the future also, if it's not me, will be able to use it. I mean, that's also a way to get more science out of the data and the CO2 we are producing.
Yes, that's a very good point. It's all about reproducible research, of course. To stimulate green initiative, ask Monica. To stimulate green initiatives, some universities give prizes for the best initiatives. Are these prizes given in a lot of institutions? Did you hear some kind of prizes like this in your own countries or in Europe?
I want to say I never heard of it. I think it's a great idea.
Also, Monica, if you had a link, please share it with us in the chat. I would like to know more about this. That's a good point too. Maybe a way to not force, but to incite scientists to create more greener lab is to congratulate them. I don't know, or to put them in the light. Maybe could lab evaluations that bring kind of labels be a solution to motivate scientists to decrease their footprint in the labs? Pauline.
I think so, and it is on the way. I think that it is now, as I said, for 5 years evaluation of structures, they will need to have a committee. So I think that at some point we will bring to evaluation of what is done actually, and not only to make committees, but also what is really done in each institution. It will be part of the evaluation of the structures, and that will be a good point. I think at least for France, I think it should be the same in every country, but it's on the way, at least in France.
Yeah, so I want to add, I think it's essential because so when we started 2.5 years ago, there was one, because it's an old building or a relatively old building we're in, there was one electricity meter for the whole building. So that means the rector was just paying the electricity bill and nobody knew how much they're consuming. So now, after us pushing, they now put 25 submeters in different corners of the building to measure. So we can now really know each lab how much they're using. And then the next thing would be that you report this to the single labs, right? That they really know, okay, this year we used less, or the lab grew, whatever, and we needed to buy new equipment and it went up. It's also fine, right? But that people really get a feeling of what's coming in and what they're using. And then the next step could be that labs really get charged for the electricity, right? Because now you just pay overheads, which is a fixed, I don't know, depending on the institute, 20%. And you never know what happens with this, right? But the labs that are really doing a good job and maybe use very little energy, they also pay these 20%. And maybe this is a way to give them this financial bonus then that they can spend on something else.
Less than 15 minutes before the end of this roundtable meeting. So feel free to share questions, to share comments in the live chat. It's the moment, if you had the one question, to push it in the chat. I have a question about how we can pull all these European initiatives together if we can, if we have to. Scientists all over the world, and mostly maybe in Europe, create associations and push different kind of actions on this matter. Do they know them each other? Is it possible to imagine that one day these initiatives would work together? Is it possible?
Yes, I definitely think it is. I mean, I've been in this area, so to say, for 1.5 years, and it has exploded in the time I've been active here. And especially the last few months, I've seen both national initiatives coming up, but also this idea of creating a European network of green lab initiatives is also coming up. So I think it's a matter of time, and then we have something, because there are some really key players now doing things across borders.
But I think it would be maybe quite difficult to coordinate them, or not?
Honestly, not really. I mean, now even people that I work 500 meters from, I meet with on Zoom, right? So in that sense, it doesn't matter if you're in one country or the other anymore. Also something great that came out of the pandemic, right? That we're so used to now communicating via phone and via Zoom, for example. So I think it's doable.
I think it's just finding common goals and then getting organized. And this is being done, right? So
finding common goals. I think everything is in this sentence.
Right, and also to see at what level.
Because you can have a good intention and sharing some values about protecting the environment, but when it comes to find the main goals to follow, to have, it's not easy.
No, but I think we need to push on the right level, right? So for example, I mean, the EU decided on this Green Deal, which I think is great and sets a benchmark for many countries. But in many countries, the universities and the research labs are still exempt from this CO2 cap the EU sets. So we could, as a European or even global one, we could push this on the European level, right? Where many practical things on what electricity provider you want to push, you don't have to put on the European level, you have to push on your local level, right? So I think we need both, right? Is there definitely topics we need to push on a European level, but there's also many things that needs to be done on a local level, yeah.
Science is a very competitive and global world. What about all these scientists, and mainly, I guess, senior scientists, who said, "Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. We have to take care about the environment. But look at those Chinese. Look at those scientists in here in the world. They do not take care at all of these questions. So we are not on the same level. We're not in equality in our competition. So if I spend too much time in finding solution to reduce my footprint, I will lose, I will lose time in this marathon, in this run. Is it an alibi, a false idea?
I think there are many different arguments that speak to many different people. And if there are group leaders or professors who don't care so much about the planet, but they care a lot about competition and money and grants and stuff, there's still a good reason to take green actions, because it does make you more competitive. You can get more research out of your money by taking green actions. It's much easier to recruit talents in the future also, because Greta Thunberg's generation, they will care about whether the lab is green or not when they're starting to look for labs. So I would hope that everybody wants to take green actions simply because it's the right thing to do for the planet, for people, and for biodiversity. But even if people don't buy that argument, there are good reasons to go green. Also, Monica, for skeptical senior white male professors.
Can I just add something to the data? I mean, the China example is something where the data is tricked, right? Because this is the current state that China went up in CO2 production quite a bit, but still per person they're producing less CO2 than we do in Europe or in the US. So they're still not producing as much as we per person. And if you then take what's really produced over history, Europe is still the biggest producer of CO2, man-made CO2. In the whole of history. So I think it's tweaking the graphs and tweaking the arguments, is that we have a huge, I mean, also historical from previous generation responsibility to change, and we are changing, but it needs to be a little bit quicker. And I'm just looking outside my window here, and many cities in Europe, I mean, Vienna is already 2.5 degrees warmer than 30 years ago. So we are feeling it already, right? So we cannot ignore it anymore.
Yes, thank you. Monica answered my question about the price. For the prices, I know that University of Geneva has a price for proposals for green projects in general, but also things like she said, less usage of animals in studios, etc. So I'll definitely check it out. Thank you. One big question now, but it's the end of this meeting in a few minutes. But one question of Luca is orienting. Okay, what's the link between slow science and protecting the environment? Do you know that? Do you think that being in a more slow science process conducts to ipso facto protecting the environment?
I think slow science would produce much better data, much happier people, and a much better environmental impact. I think this fast science, where we're going for quick ideas and quick publications all the time, it's producing a lot of irreproducible results. First of all, it's making people stressed and anxious, and we're leaving a considerable ecological footprint behind. So I think there's a very strong connection between slow science and the planet.
Do environmental issues and ethics questions, do they change the way excellence in science is understood? That is maybe my last question, because excellence in science, the fact to be the best, to have the best H index or so on, it is the alpha and omega of scientists today. Do you think that excellence in science changes due to this new, preoccupations, these new questions that raise since 5 or 10 years?
It's rising, as you said, for a while, as we said from the beginning, and also I think for the European question, I think that coordination will go on with the network, which are going now as this table ronde is interesting also because we have people from different countries, and I think it's great for that. And the initiative from the committee is also based on the fact that there is already some network that exist in Europe. And this question may come in part of the excellence. It is not yet, so we have to work on that. I think it's also a question that as Nikoline said, there are many young people that are very keen and dedicated to these questions, and they will not go in places where the environment is not respected. So I think it's a way to evolve, and excellence is not the opposite of green labs.
My last question will be addressed to three of you. What are today and in the future the main challenges about the place of ecology in research laboratories? If you had to,
maybe I'll start. So I think the two challenges is to convert the knowledge to action, right? So we're scientists, we know the data. I guess most people even agree on the data. But we're not changing our habits yet, even in the labs, which is for me surprising that people see the graphs and they see the curve going up, and they're not really taking action. And the second thing is, I think the challenge will be to integrate it into the system that these kind of, if it's social sustainability or even green sustainability, is integrated more into our work life or our habits, that really this is promoted in a way that should be. And this is, I think, the only way that we can make the change quite quick to becoming sustainable in the long term.
Thank you, Jeroen. Nikoline, one challenge, the most important one. What should it be?
Oh, just to mention one that's really difficult. I think we need everyone to want to make a difference. We don't need, if we have very few people doing everything perfectly, that's not going to get us somewhere. We need everybody to do it imperfectly. That's when we start to see like a real difference being made also in science. So if everybody does something, then we're already really far. So I think that's the critical mass we need to hit. So it's not someone else's problem. It's not the flight industry. It's not the oil companies. It's everyone doing something.
I completely agree. I will complete with the question. Maybe from what we just evocated is the fact that science as it is made now is really consuming a lot of materials, but also of human beings, and so we need to go maybe in the direction of a slow science, and I think it will be a revolution to go on that way, and it will imply that not only one country goes on that way, and it may be a big challenge. I think maybe the biggest.
A huge thanks to three of you, Nikoline Borgemann, Jeroen Dobbelaere, and Thibaut Voeltzel, for sharing with us right now all your ideas and describing your initiatives. It was a great moment. Thanks again for being with us. We truly appreciate it. So a huge thanks. And this is the end. Ladies and gentlemen, of this roundtable. We'll meet again in this afternoon at 2 p.m. and we will be talking about, gene editing, CRISPR-Cas9, etc., etc. Thanks again, dear guests, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.